Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very accomplished and senior professional from London, UK, Mr. Andrea Petrone. Andrea, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Ashutosh.
Thank you. Andrea is an executive coach and advisor to CEO and their leadership teams. And today we'll talk coaching, strategy, and culture. So, Andrea, let me start by asking you, you help CEOs and senior executives to become world-class leaders. Help me explain the process you follow, and please give an example.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, every really ambitious professional wants to get to the top, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I do, I really help them to improve themselves, to find the way, to find the key really to build their influence, their reputation, and their leadership presence in order then to lead effectively any type of organization. It really doesn't matter whether, it's a small company, large company. That doesn't really matter because the process and what you really need to learn as a leader doesn't really change much. So that's essentially my goal. And I've been, CEO myself. I've been a senior executive myself. So I know, what is probably one of the best way, even fastest way to get there.
Wonderful.
To give you some example, I mean, I coach with international leaders, and what I realize is they all have a sort of blind spots, Ashutosh, right? So sometimes we feel that we have all the answers, we know whatever we need in order to lead properly. But the reality is, because we are humans, we have those specific blind spots that might actually have an impact on our ability to lead successfully in an organization. So my goal at the beginning is really try to find out what these blind spots are. Okay. Because once you really know what they are, then you can give them a name, but most importantly, you can start working on it. Because there might be one single blind spot that might have an incredible negative impact on your performance.
Wonderful.
And if you show the blind spot to your team, most likely even your team, unfortunately, maybe will have the same behavior. So you have to make sure that you are the message in the organization. So it all starts from you and from your self-awareness.
Very interesting. And for my viewers and listeners, can you give an example of what a blind spot could be?
Oh, yeah, totally. So right now, for example, I'm working with a leader that he didn't know or didn't think to have one blind spot that was actually for me quite dangerous, was his inability to listen properly his teammates.
Okay.
And when you don't listen, when you are distracted, when you talk, when you listen, when you meet people, then you're not able to go deeper in what really is going on in their life, in their career, in their job they're doing, the project they're running. So listening, for example, as well as empathy are two of the major blind spot that right now most of people at the very senior leader have.
How interesting. So, Andrea, after a successful corporate career, what made you become a coach?
Yeah, well, great question. And we ask ourselves this question many times. In my experience, Ashutosh, I think what led me to take this path was the fact that a couple of reasons, I think. One is the fact that I did have the luxury of having a coach myself in my corporate career. And also I have been, honestly, not very lucky or having great boss. I had few, but I had a lot of bad bosses too. And then I realized that, okay, so the new generations, the new, upcoming talents, the new leaders, they deserve being treated differently in the organizations. That's why I said it's the time now to transfer my knowledge, my stories, my insights to a new generation of leaders, so maybe they can have a little bit easier career progression. That's one reason. And the other reason is the fact that I spent, before starting my own practice, I spent 2 or 3 weeks really in loneliness to try to understand exactly what was my purpose. And then what I realized is I had a brilliant career, I had a great results, but my inner purpose was really serving others. So I thought, I can move ahead and with a career progression and for other 10 years, 15 years, as many people do. And then when they retire, they start maybe, or close to retire, they start coaching. I say, I don't want to do that. I want to serve my purpose as soon as possible. So I became relatively young, as 45 years old as a coach, but then it was super rewarding.
Fabulous, fabulous. My next question to you is, Andrea, how has your background supported your own coaching philosophy, your style, and your values?
A lot, really a lot. And I tell you why, because I've been a leader, executive with international career, and I've been essentially dealing with business challenges and issues all the time in very challenging contexts. So I don't have an HR background, for example. So I've been in the first line since the beginning of my career. Now, that led me to build a strong relation with C-suite leaders because I've been there. So we speak the same language, but also I'm very practical. I love being practical because I think there are so many people that are offering a sort of advisory services a little bit fluffy. I'm not. I really want to bring specific value by giving specific opportunities for them to learn and to grow and to be coached. So yeah, pragmatism for me is a big one because I think it's the best way to get results.
Well said. My next question to you, Andrea, is that, we are all through our lives, we meet a lot of people, we are influenced by a lot of people.
Yes.
How have you been shaped by some of the people in your life, and how are they influencing you as a coach today?
But that's back to my point before. So I did have maybe the luxury to work with coaches before, although I got inspired by incredible international leaders that were around me. In my personal experience, having worked in 7 different countries, in also in large organizations, I have seen incredible international leaders speaking, influencing people in organization. I always thought, well, these are the kind of role models I would like to have, and also a type of person I would like to become in the future. So it's not one single person, but it's a pool of people that all of them had a different traits, different behaviors, but collectively they taught me a lot about how to be a great leader. And then, of course, over the years, then you start working with mentors, with other coaches. I'm a coach, but I work with other coaches. So I understand that we need to step up our game every single day. So it's not one person. It's a collective team of people that can inspire you for something specific that you don't have.
Interesting. And yet, when I think of it, I mean, I started working for the Indian arm of British American Tobacco in 1979. In those days, your mentor or your coach was either a family elder or someone senior in a company who took a liking for you. I wanted to ask you, how has, in your opinion, coaching evolved that it is such a major profession today and people are willing to pay for it?
Well, to be fair, there are some organizations, unfortunately, they're still coaching only the CEO, the C-suite, and unfortunately, they're not coaching, other layers in the organization, which I think is absolutely wrong. On the other hand, what we have seen in the industry now, it's the growing software-based coaching businesses where you pay just a fraction of what you normally pay for an executive coach, but you can coach many, many people at the same time. Now, I'm not sure, either of these models actually are right. I think there is a balance of this. However, I think coaching now finally is getting ahead. We are having more people coaching organization, which is amazing. There is a question about scaling because, if you're a large organization, you can't pay, honestly, coaches for each of the individuals that you want to coach. Everyone honestly deserves a coach, right, in an organization. So, for example, in my practice, we develop a kind of a coaching academy that with a fraction of the cost, then you can coach a team of 10, 12 people at the same time. So you have to find those kind of equilibrium, balance, or mechanism in order to give scalability to a coaching opportunity in the organization. Otherwise, it will be only just for the elite, or will be just, I'm saying cheap in a good way, coaching for everyone, but there's not really great value at the end.
Very interesting. And what would you say are some of your unique perspectives or some of your secret sauce that you bring to a coaching relationship?
Yeah, well, I think it's my ability, Ashutosh, to combine, of course, my business experience, my pragmatism,
Mm,
in a very specific situations when leaders they have such a big challenge ahead and they
mm,
are concerned how to run and execute it. So
mm,
essentially, I sit in a triangle, if you want, where
mhm,
there are, the change, the strategy, and the people, so the teams. I
mm,
normally sit in the middle of that, able to work with teams, especially at the leadership level, and then define the strategy you want to do, define how you want to change, and then
mm,
make it happen. So I think that is a sort of interesting way to bring pragmatism, because you can really solve problems if you have this approach. So it's not just wonderful open-ended question, but go straight to what are the results that you want to achieve in your coaching
mm.
engagement. Because if there are no clear results to achieve, it's no point, honestly, to spend money for coaching.
Wonderful. One more question on coaching before we move to the next
Yeah.
segment. Um, this is now the age of the millennials and the Gen Zs. You know, the millennial Gen Z leaders are now getting into positions of influence in most companies. What would you say are some of the areas the younger
Mhm.
leaders need to be coached in?
That's very interesting, because the new generation are very different than my generation, your generation, Ashutosh, and
Absolutely.
we need to understand that. In my personal experience, although I don't do a lot of work with them, but
Mm-hmm.
in other, my work is impacted as
Mm-hmm.
well to
Mm-hmm.
the to these generations. What I see, I think they should probably learn how to be relationships in organization,
Mm-hmm.
because relationship is huge.
Yeah.
They are high achievers. They want to get results very fast, but they need to remember the organizations have sort of clear, sometimes not very much clear rules, but also you need to build your influence in organization.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way to build your influence is understanding much better who are you working with, you know, who are the decision makers in organizations, where the really power is, where the influence is. And you really need to build your own reputation, your influence, and the only way to do it is by building relationships. So
That's
understanding exactly,
mm-hmm.
your colleagues, but also understand how can I influence others. So if you understand these couple of things, you're going to be incredible fine organization. And now that you're working remotely, it's a little bit more challenging doing it. So that's why I think it's super important that young generation understand that.
Fascinating. Let's now move to culture, strategy and
Yeah.
culture. Let me start by asking you, how do you define culture in an organization?
Culture is essentially how we work.
Mm-hmm.
Is how we do things. Very simplistic way, but that's really how what culture is.
Mm-hmm.
So is how we do things. Interesting thing about culture is not a set of values. Culture is a set of behaviors. So these are the behaviors that are driven by the core values of the organization. But values and behaviors can also have a mismatch. So you have an incredible value, but then the behavior that you show consistently in organizations, they're very different or not aligned with the value that you want to promote. So essentially, these are a set of behaviors and rules. Sometimes are defined, some other times they are not. So you need to understand exactly, what behaviors are. So that's essentially how we do things. But it's also what we don't do. So by not having a specific behavior, that essentially is like having a specific culture that we follow. Sometimes, we focus on what we do to define culture, but it's also what we don't do that define cultures. So that's how I say it.
Very interesting. And from the perspective of a startup founder,
Yeah.
Who's building an absolutely new company and is focused on getting the business, et cetera, how do they build culture in a startup?
So we have read a lot of things about culture in startups, especially in technology world, right? So now the challenge that many founders have is the fact that they build something from scratch with a very small pool of people. But it's proven now that as soon as you increase your team from, let's say, 12, 15 people, that's normally when the dilution of culture kicks in.
Correct.
So you have to be very careful of making sure that all the newcomers, all the new people you're hiring, they really understand the culture that you had in the first place when you launch a business, but also the culture that you want to have in the future. That doesn't mean that the culture won't change, because culture can change based on the different behavior that you want to instill in an organization. But always remember, the more you grow, the higher is the risk that your culture get diluted. So you really need to make sure, especially in the hiring process, that the people that are coming on board, they understand it fully, the culture that you want to have.
And you work a lot on culture. Can culture be changed?
Oh, definitely can. We can definitely change the culture, but the only way to do it is starting from the top.
Okay.
So has to be a decision made by the CEO.
Right.
Because, it could be for many reasons, either because you don't like anymore these behaviors, or you see new behaviors in the organization and you don't want to see them, or hopefully because the specific behaviors that you have, they're not helping to drive higher performance. So if you link the cultures, the behaviors to performance, then for me, it's a very good decision or good reasons to change your culture. If you just want to change it just for the sake of changing, for me, it's not a good idea, because changing culture is tough, could be long, it could be difficult. So do it for, a small reason doesn't really make sense. If you do for performance, it does.
Very interesting. And would you be able to share an example of how you got involved in the process you followed to change culture?
Yeah, well, right now I'm working with a couple of organizations on that, and what I realized, Ashutosh, which is it's quite common, when you work with an organization that is merging or is acquiring small businesses, normally the corporate and then by entrepreneurial businesses, that's normally when you see a major clash of culture, when you see very structural, sometimes hierarchical, sometimes very static, and not very flexible organization buying or acquiring small organization. They are used to be very flexible, make decisions very fast, adaptable. That's normally when you see problems. And I normally get involved when this problem arises, when you see essentially a clash and you have to find a common ground. So I don't believe it's right to maybe the culture B, which is for maybe to give an example, entrepreneurial companies change their way of operating to become like the culture A, the corporate A.
Right.
By finding maybe a different culture, it could be C, the combination of the best of A and the best of B, and elaborating a culture C. That is a way to do it.
Fascinating. And now to ask you a question on culture and coaching. You live in a country which is multicultural. You work with people across different countries who are from different cultures. I want your thoughts on how does culture impact coaching?
Well, it does. So we have two levels of culture. So we have a geographical culture, which is very important for those organizations. They're working globally, of course, and most organizations now they work globally. So there is a different cultures based on where you sit when you are in the world, but also as we discussed, there are different culture internally.
Correct.
And in my podcast, so the World Class Leader Show, I normally interview leaders that have an international responsibility. And what I realize is you really have to find a common ground too, to adapt with people. They are operating different culture. And sometimes what is interesting, Ashutosh, is the small details make a huge difference. It could be the time how you made of your meetings, how you engage with people in the Zoom call, or how you write emails with each other. So you really need to understand the differences, because these differences, the cultural difference based on the country where you are, they can make huge impact on doing good business or bad business. There are plenty of cases in the business world where, when leaders from one country, they move to another country and they're trying to replicate the same way of doing business with terrible and negative results. So you have to be very careful how you're doing that.
Well said. Well said. So I have time for two more questions. My next one is that you say that you deconstruct the success of high performance leaders, share their stories, and teach the most effective strategies to move from average to greatness. Help me understand this, and please give me an example.
Yeah, so that is the description of the podcast I mentioned before.
Yeah.
So the World Class Leader Show that we are starting now, season 2. But we are essentially interviewing CEOs, CEOs with also some other best-selling authors, and we asked them, not just what was their success story, but what I really want to understand is what are the practical insights and stories that you need to share in order to allow other people that are listening to trying to repeat the success that you made. Because many leaders, they don't really share the success stories. And by the way, that's happening as well in organizations.
Correct.
So, you see a lot of organizations that work in silos where there is no really time for storytelling, where people internally, they talk about the failures, but also the success that they had, especially with the large organizations.
Yeah.
There is no this cross-pollination between people. So that's why I launched a podcast with this idea. I want really to have successful leaders share practical insights so other people that can listen, they can say, you know what, I can do it too. So the more practical the insight is, the easier for people is to do it.
Very interesting. Well, good luck with your podcast.
Thank you.
My last question to you, Andrea, and this is for the many people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your amazing journey, your incredible knowledge of coaching, strategy, culture, what would you say are 3 lessons you want our viewers and listeners to take away from your journey and from our conversation?
Right. Well, it's a great question. I think for me, I would say number 1 is never get complacent.
Okay.
Never. So no matter where you are, no matter what steps you made, no matter what success you had in the past, always look for something more. So complacency kills curiosity, kills creativity, and kills success. So that's for me has been a big learning based also on my personal experience. Second one is also challenge your status quo. Don't think that it could be related to the first one, but the second I think is more about don't get things for granted. So challenge current thinking, challenge current behaviors. Make sure that you go deeper because, if you stay at a very superficial level, you at some point you ended up unfortunately to have an average or mediocrity in your life. So always go deeper, try to understand why things happen, why, and what else you can do to get things better. And finally, being curious. Being curious, it's the skill of the future. If you are curious, you will be one of the most successful leaders in the future.
Fascinating. Andrea, on that note, and your 3 incredible lessons: never get complacent, challenge your own status quo, and be curious all the time. Thank you so much for speaking to me. Thank you for talking to me about your own journey, about your own philosophies and your thoughts about coaching. Thank you also for sharing with me your thoughts on culture and for your podcast. Thank you again, and good luck to you.
Well, thank you so much, Ashutosh. It's been an amazing conversation, and good luck as well with the brand called You. It's an amazing podcast. You're doing such amazing stuff. So
Thank you so much.
Keep going.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.